Cool. All right, we are live and we'll start seeing our attendees come in for today's session, which is perfect. Lovely to see some faces that I've definitely seen before. Nice to see people coming back. And also at this time for Europe, Central Europe, it's quite late. But that means that our Americas are early, and so people from there can join in at a more decent time for them. Part of the joy of being in a global network, having all the time zones. And we've got lovely international speakers as well. Perfect. We'll just give it a moment for people to come in case they're just a little bit behind. But they'll come in bit by bit. All right, so let's get the session started then. So it's my pleasure to welcome you all today, both to the panelists and the attendees, to a topical roundtable on breaking assumptions about regenerative agriculture. We'll answer questions like, can regenerative agricultural practices be executed at a global level and feed the world population? Is it actually sustainable? How can regenerative agriculture keep up with conventional food production? And today's discussion is led by Felipe Villela, who's the founder of reNature and lead author at UN Environment. We will uncover the true impact of regenerative agriculture and break the widespread assumptions that the approach's impact and potential to scale are limited. So the session will be up for an hour and a half, where we'll hear from a very diverse panel who's joining us from all over the world. As attendee, you can hear us, you can see us, but we cannot hear you. But you can interact with us in the chat and feel free to ask your questions in the Q&A as well, so that we can get to them as well. So Felipe, it's my pleasure to have you here, and please go for it.
Perfect. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be with the Thought for Food on this topical roundtable. This is where it all begins with reNature, right? So that's where I met my co-founder Matteo de Vos for starting reNature. It's a great pleasure to be here and having all these incredible people as panelists to discuss such an important topic. More than ever, it's something that we should be putting in the high priorities and agenda towards a more sustainable future, right? So really great to be in this panel. So basically, just to introduce a little bit myself. So my name is Felipe. I'm the CEO and founder of reNature. It's a Dutch organization working on scaling regenerative agriculture worldwide. Coming from a large-scale organic agricultural family, I was always passionate about nature-inclusive farming systems that are commercially viable, and it can also regenerate soil and biodiversity. 10 years ago, I went to the Amazon rainforest in Brazil to visit a farmer, and on the way back, I saw this massive deforestation for industrial agricultural commodities, and that have impacted me big time. I questioned myself if there was any other way of producing major commodities industries need in a regenerative way. Since then, I went on a journey to search for the highest experts, scientists, and farmers working globally in the field of regenerative agriculture to make sure we can design economically viable systems to support corporates willing to transition their agricultural systems. So in a nutshell, yeah, I'm passionate about regenerative agriculture, working a lot with the tackling deforestation issues, and it's great to be here today. So before we can all start, I would like to introduce everyone who is here today. So the first one is Hugh Evans from UK. He works for the farmer at Three Poles. Also Kelcie, she's the founder of Bumblechain. Ana from Brazil, which I know really well her. She is the founder of Meli Amazonian Bees Network. And Matteo de Vos from Belgium. He works as the ecosystems campaigner at Greenpeace Belgium, also at Foodsake podcast host and the Regional Foodies documentary. So quite a lot of interesting things everyone is doing in regards to build a regenerative future. So I'm really curious to hear everyone's story. So please, if each of the panelists could introduce yourself and what regenerative agriculture means for you, that would be great. So if you would like to start, maybe Katie, Kelcie, sorry, would you like to start?
Awesome, I can start. Hi guys, thanks for joining today. So my name is Kelcie Miller-Anderson. I'm an environmental scientist, social entrepreneur, and innovator who's from Calgary, Canada. So I started working in sort of the environmental science space quite young. At 15, I started developing natural plant and fungi-based remediation methods to help restore soil that had been contaminated with oil pollution. And from there, I've now gone on, I founded my first company based on that technology to commercialize it and make it available when I was 21. And now I've started my second venture, which is, still in that environmental realm, but a totally different approach, where what I'm working on is developing blockchain-based solutions to prevent fraud and adulteration in the honey supply chain. But really the goal is to help uplift and preserve and conserve global bee populations. And it's really important because pollinators are often overlooked, but really the impact of pollination is one of the biggest value adds to global agriculture. And agriculture wouldn't exist how it does today, and we won't be able to feed our planet without bees. So it's all about how we can best support them. And did you want me to talk quickly about my views on regenerative agriculture, or do we just want to all introduce ourselves first?
Just what does it mean for you, regenerative agriculture, and then we can go later on what you do in regards to this. Thank you.
Cool, I can do that. So in terms of what regenerative agriculture means to me is really looking at how the complex system interacts and how we can really focus on bringing nature and sort of ecosystem conservation into what we're doing. I think it's going to have a huge role in really creating opportunities for smaller communities and traditionally impoverished communities or communities in rural areas to really take control of their food production and feeding their communities. So I think it's going to have a huge role in creating stability.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kelcie, for the introduction. It's really inspiring to have you here today. Thank you. And could you please explain us? I don't know if I pronounced it right, but I think I'm trying to do my best. But please introduce yourself, please.
Yeah. So my name's Hugh. I run a farm called Three Pools in South Wales. My background is in civil and environmental engineering, where all the solutions to drinking water, water pollution, flood risk, all of this kept coming back to farming is the major barrier to putting in most engineering solutions to make the landscape work more efficiently for humans. Because of that, and I kept seeing this disconnect between farmers and engineers and people trying to influence farmers. I was fortunate enough that I was able to buy a farm, become a farmer myself, and then be able to speak from that side of the divide. So I then also run the farm as an event space so that we can bring in more people so they can see what we're doing, and we can really help promote the different, like very visually and functionally different landscape. Hopefully one day. We're going to be going almost 3 years now. And then so regenerative agriculture for me means with sustainability is keeping things as they are. Regenerative agriculture is about trying to achieve more than currently is done. So from an engineering perspective, this would be like there's currently a level of flood risk. We can achieve a greater reduction in flood risk and all the other different ecosystem services that can be found from a healthy resilient ecosystem in the landscape.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ru, for the introduction and also mentioning what it means for you, regenerative agriculture. The voice was a bit breaking, so I hope that throughout this panel, this will be solved. Maybe just check if everything is okay in your system. Well, let's go on with Anna. So Anna, I know you do an incredible work with Melly in the Amazon with bees, and I would love to hear more. If you could introduce yourself and also mention what it means regenerative agriculture for you, that would be great.
Yeah, great to be here, first of all. And I was very happy that Kelcie came before me because like she already talked a bit about like how important the bees are, and I was like, yay, finally. So I will add to that. I was raised in the Amazon, and in the Amazon, we have heaps of different kinds of bees. So we have different, like around 240 in Brazil, but there are like 500 registered native bee, stingless bees, and Melly works with that. So being raised in the Amazon, all this conflict of big landowners and traditional communities, rural communities, it's all very something that I had to face very strongly in all my, in the, I don't know, 20 years I lived there. And so yeah, that definitely brought me not only an expertise on that, but also a close relationship to that. So I have close friends and family who, and really, like, I know very closely, I can work very closely with traditional and rural communities because I know how to address, I know their problems, and we've tried to find the best way to do that. That's why we first thought about working with bees, because they fly around, and so I don't need to work with the native bees. It's just the perfect deal because they are the primary pollinators of many native plants. So that's kind of what it comes from. And I also found very interesting because like I'm also, my background is also engineering, so I'm an engineer, and I also work with, I find it interesting that the two other presentations also mentioned the pollution as one of the first motivators, because I also worked with a pollution problem due to mining in the traditional communities, traditional indigenous communities. So I find it very interesting. And I also have a podcast. So since 3 years, since 2017, start of 2000, more than 3 years, I have Apina. Apina is an indigenous name for tomorrow, and we bring topics for how to be the best tomorrow we can do, that is diverse, social justice, and environmental regeneration are the main topics. So I kind of also found interesting the conversation here, and I'm very glad to be here. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Anna. It was really clear, and also beautiful work that you have been doing. And I'm sure that there's so much more to share in regards to your contribution towards some resilient indigenous communities working in the Amazon. It's really powerful. Thank you so much. So please, Matteo, could you please introduce yourself and also mention what regenerative agriculture means to you? I know you have, when I met you, you do work with as an ecosystem campaigner for the Greenpeace in Belgium. And I know you also have some, the Food Sake podcast host and the Regional Foodies documentary. So it would be great to hear a little bit from you. Please, thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Felipe, and thanks to Top for Food for organizing this. I think this is a great initiative. It's always fun to talk about solutions and specifically about the prospects and the potential of regenerative agriculture. So to introduce myself quickly, my name is Matteo. I'm based in Brussels for the last 2 years. I started working at Greenpeace on the Sustainable Agriculture campaign in 2019. It's a global campaign that focuses on fighting industrial meat and dairy production, overproduction, and transitioning towards an agroecological system. So a system that's based on regeneration. And it's a campaign that very much focuses on the one hand on addressing some of the major problems with industrial animal agriculture. So looking at the fact that there's a huge competition between feed and food, right? So that, there's a lot of arable land that gets used to produce industrial meat and dairy. And that there's, of course, also a heavy reliance on inputs. So inputs for feed, such as soy, which often get grown in the Brazilian Cerrado, the savanna, for example, and leads to a lot of destruction. And then on the other hand, of course, locally, so in Belgium, it has massive repercussions for biodiversity and for water, pollution, air quality, soil quality. And of course, what people often forget too is farmer livelihoods, right? We lose millions of farmers. And we've lost 4.5 million farmers, I think, in the EU since 2014, I think it is. So there's an enormous loss there too. So that's kind of the problem side of it. And then of course, the solution side of it is focusing on agroecology and on regenerative agriculture. And that's what I've been working on for the last 2 years. Before that, I started my podcast, so the For Food's Sake podcast, in 2017. And that's all about interviewing experts and farmers and people that are working in the food movement and to share their experiences and their expertise. So that's really a big passion of mine. And lastly, the documentary is all about interviewing their farmer portraits of farmers that are working often in conventional agriculture and that are looking ways to transform their farms and look at innovative business models and how they can transform their local economies. So that's a little bit about me and what I'm doing. Regenerative agriculture, what it means to me, it's essentially, for me, it's taking nature as our benchmark, right? So when we look at industrial agriculture today or a lot of conventional agricultural systems, agriculture isn't necessarily inherently natural, right? It's a man-made concept and it has repercussions, especially, and I think uniquely for soil. So for me, when I talk about regenerative agriculture, I always start with soil. Soil should be the center of farming. It should be it's the lowest common denominator. It's what every farmer has to look at the quality of their soil. And it's something that's a benchmark for both conventional and organic farmers, right? So it's a true benchmark for checking if your farm is truly sustainable in the true sense, in the true durable long term. So regenerative agriculture is all about putting soil back in the center. That's what I'd say.
And that's really powerful, Matteo. Thank you so much. And I truly agree with you, like that, everything goes back to soil, and soil is really the basis of life. So I really respect what you said, and it's really inspiring to hear your impression of regenerative agriculture and your background. So thank you so much for this, and everyone for the introduction. And also to listen to you guys. It's great to understand the context that you guys come from in this field. And of course, now I would like to get a little bit deeper to understand what is, the approach that you have in your work in regards to regenerative agriculture. Like, just like in reNature, for example, we are targeting these major crops that are, causing a lot of deforestation and soil degradation, and also, co-creating with farmers the design process so that they can be listened, because there's a lot of local knowledge already available. So yeah, I would like to hear from you guys. How is your approach in regards to the topic of regenerative agriculture in your work? So I would like to start with who. If you can explain, would be great.
Can you hear me better now? Yeah.
Yeah.
So on the farm here, we've got 140 acres of mainly permanent pasture. So it's been grass for, well, no one in the area is known of the fields ever being ploughed up. And we had our soils tested, so we had the most biologically active soils in the wider test that was done. So to achieve that, we're using cows and sheep in mob rotational grazing. We've also got chickens in rotational grazing. We've got a variety of fruit trees. We're just in some discussions at the moment with someone to start a bit of horticulture. And we've got bees. So we're producing loads of different yields, moving things around as much as possible. And then in terms of the permaculture aspect of it, we're trying to design.
It's still breaking a little bit. Maybe what I sense is just if you get a little bit distant from the microphone, maybe it helps. Yeah. I'm not sure. Let's try.
Yeah. If I sit still. So we are trying to design using energy flows of how we're moving the animals around the farm, how we're moving water around the farm, and how we're using trees to act as sound barriers and wind barriers, and then using cuttings from the trees as tree fodder for the livestock. A lot of livestock at the moment.
Perfect. We were hearing you well, like this, a bit better. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Good. Would you like to continue your line of thought, or
well, in terms of using regenerative, it's the practical aspects of regenerative farming, which in the UK is about managing grassland properly. The UK grows grass well. That's kind of why we got invaded for most of history, was for our grass. And so in the UK context, growing meat on grass systems is the most effective way of holding carbon within the soils, is the most effective way of providing fertility for arable systems, providing fertility for horticultural systems. And then our model here on the farm is about trying to show that we can produce whole plate farming, so we can produce every food group that you need on your plate to be able to have a healthy, balanced diet, just through careful management of what you're looking to produce and how you produce it. And I think nature, wild space, and farmland shouldn't have such a clear divide. You can forage and hunt things from your slightly more wild space, say your woods. You can run livestock through there on a quick pass, just don't let them hang out there for ages. Meanwhile, you can have a lot more wild animals living within your fields. It's getting the distinction differently.
Is it some sort of like a silvo arable systems that you are working with there?
Yeah, we've planted up some areas to be agroforestry, silver pastures, and you really notice how the livestock hang out around the trees. In terms of moving them really regularly, you can set up the electric fencing around the orchard. So we've got sheep moving around one orchard, we've got chickens moving around another orchard. We've even built a little, because we're all here stuck in lockdown, we built a little golf course within an agroforestry system. So we've got the sheep keeping the greens short, in between loads of apple and pear trees. It's a pretty lovely place to be, really.
Amazing, amazing. No, that sounds very interesting. Something we should definitely like talk more, because we're now also working a lot with the silvopasture, and then using the grazing system from Alien Savory as a combination. You know, putting silvopasture together with the holistic grazing management.
Yeah, exactly that.
And then it sounds like pretty much what you're working with, which is
it
fantastic.
works. Like we've been keeping sheep for 3 years now. Definitely the start was a bit of a learning curve, having not kept livestock before. Now I can see improved growth rates from how we're moving them around. I can see that we aren't having to worm them as often, so reduced drug use, which is going to lead to healthier soils because you're not killing off dung beetles every time you do it. It's improved welfare, improved growth rates, and that should turn into profit because it has to be commercially viable. And that's very important for us, that we actually show something commercially viable, because that will inspire other farmers to take it on, rather than because we believe it should be the right thing to do.
Perfect. Thank you so much, who is really powerful, this. And I mean, it's really something to be focusing on. I think that this is a source of inspiration for many stakeholders to start adopting these practices. Really pretty good. So thank you so much for your contribution. Now I would like to go to Kelcie to talk about like what is her approach in regards to regenerative agriculture and the work she's doing with blockchain. I mean, it would be great to hear from you what you're doing in regards to this.
Yeah. So I suppose the work that we're really doing with Bumblechain is we're looking at how we can contribute by building a sustainable and revenue generating social enterprise. So obviously, stabilizing the global honey market and creating opportunities for farmers, that's great. The food security part of it is great too. But really the purpose and the motivation behind Bumblechain isn't necessarily about, just stabilizing the honey supply chain just to stabilize it and to create more profits for farmers and safer food for consumers. That's not really what it's about. The motivation behind it is how can we create an enterprise that can generate revenue to then support sort of our overall mission, which is really to help global bee conservation and pollinator conservation around the world. So the goal is that by using blockchain in order to create a really secure and transparent, traceable record of the honey right from the hive to the shelf, and give consumers access to that information, is that, as we're able to generate revenues, we're able to reinvest that money back into nonprofits and researchers who are doing work on global bee conservation in different countries around the world. So eventually, hopefully, we'll be able to partner with organizations like Melly Bees, sorry, I might have said that wrong. But the goal is that we can sort of distribute that help and help others, contribute to the same mission. So in terms of, how it's relating to regenerative agriculture is really just showing people the importance of bees, and actually the importance of managed pollinators and treating them as sort of a livestock in a way too, and how that's so important to global agriculture. The FAO actually has estimates that with properly managed pollination, so if you're, bringing the beehives to the right locations at the right time, that we're actually going to be able to increase crop output and productivity by up to 25%. So just something as simple as making sure that the pollinators are there at the right time and that there's enough to pollinate the crops is a huge way for us to be producing more food from the same amount of land and the same amount of sort of inputs. So that's sort of a big part of it. And, you know, obviously bees are more important than to just agriculture. They're part of any sort of whole ecosystem. So when you're talking about regenerative agriculture, especially when it's coming to sort of smaller communities, making sure that they have pollinators in place is really going to help them sort of create sort of the right ecosystems and speed up the rate at which they're able to sort of restore those ecosystems and create these sort of agroforestry systems to feed their communities.
That's beautiful, Kelcie. Thank you so much for this contribution. And I mean, you know, we see it like in China now, like cotton farmers doing hand picking, like pollination in the trees, and it's like what do we want, like robot bees or the actual bees as it doing this work, you know, like, so it's really inspiring to hear what you do, and it's truly impactful in every manner. So thank you so much for your contribution, and I'm sure there's a lot of synergy with Anna. So I will connect the bee to the other bee, Melly. And so Anna, if you could please, you know, just mention how is your approach in regards to the bee work that you do with indigenous communities in Brazil? I know you come from there, and we are now working together in the mentorship for the Regenerative Agriculture Prize, which is great that you won. And yeah, hopefully we will be celebrating that physically in Malaysia sometime when it allows us. So please go. The floor is yours, Anna.
Yeah, thank you very much to mention, and thank you for the TFF and reNature for the prize. Can you hear me? Like, oh yeah. So Mali has a very social approach regarding regenerative agriculture. So we of course work with soil is the most important part, and but we also bring that in a social perspective, because that's coming from that social background. I know how deeply connected it is. So we actually don't only work with indigenous communities, but we work with traditional communities in general. So we have three parts, like traditional communities. So it's indigenous and quilombolas. We work. We have around 3 to 4 indigenous territory communities working with us, and 3 quilombola communities. We also have rural communities, so some coming from landless workers movements and so on. So we also work with them, and like general rural communities, mostly small holders. And we intend to also, with a smaller scale, work with urban meliponiculture as well. And I will tell you why. It's because like the meliponini bees, the bees, they fly, and I'm working in the cities that are just next to a huge forest. And so like there are farms, they're like actually not farms, they are houses of one of them, of our network contact, like one of the members of Mali. The house is just next to the forest, to the reserve. So he has around 100 beehives there, and I mean they have enough to eat. But of course, how we started with Mali was with indigenous communities. So that's why even my bees like are made from Kayapó people. Bepunu Kayapó Drew and his wife made the details. So we started with traditional communities, and for us it's very important to be able to preserve the forest, because the indigenous community are suffering a lot of in danger regarding illegal mining mainly, and also farms invading the area. So big landowners. So even we are currently writing a project exactly to deal with this, the fields that were devastated by the landowners. Well, the big landowners who invaded reserve what's illegal, and they want to do some agroforest work with that. But well, anyways, making it shorter, we intend that we are already very close to a forest that's reached its climax, in the sense that like we have I think the most common is the paranuts tree. So we have like a couple of very so we are working with a forest that, if you think about agroforestry or regenerative agriculture, we pass through all the stages. So there's one of our work, we are trying to work with this beautiful forest in a regenerative way, in the sense of like keeping it providing. We are in the same time also working with lands that were very destroyed, and we need to bring some agroforestry work to really regenerate this area. And so it's kind of, we intend that we understand that's also a lot about the society and about the people, to keep the tradition and to enhance the practice. We also work together with the local universities and research institutes, because we understand that the society, the traditional communities are not isolated. They are in the middle of a society, and they, I mean, I have a couple of indigenous friends since my school, because like they go to school in the city, they go to university in the city, they go to, you know, like we share the city. So that's kind of also a crucial point, that like they're not there not to be touched. They are in the middle, and they are able to produce knowledge, and they know a lot. And especially if you talk with the older people, and for me it was very, very touching, because like one of the members of Mali, her father comes from a Quilombola community, and they used to work with bees. They stopped for some reason, and she started talking with him, and he told about a couple of bee species that she had no clue that he knew, because she had no clue. I mean, and we almost lost this knowledge, because this knowledge almost didn't get to our generation. And for me, it was very, very touching when, because of Melly, she reached her father, who comes from a traditional community, and started to get this knowledge back. And for me, it's like really, I think it's the most beautiful part of this work, is to enhance and be able to reach the community and actually bring a lot of perspectives. Because another point is like, so myself, I come from the Amazon area, but I'm currently actually in Germany. So I'm in a German farm right now, in Allgäu. And when like this other friend who comes from the Quilombola community, she did her master in USP, so one of Brazil's best universities. And people don't expect us to go back to where we come from, and they vocalize that, and like, what are you doing here? And we need to show, hey, we can come back, because we are the best persons to work with these problems. And that's a crucial thing. And there are many social problems behind that takes us away, and we want to change that. That's more or less about it. Sorry.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Anna. It's really interesting to hear that you come from this really, the social aspect of things. And I mean, I'm also from Brazil, so I know pretty much that in Brazil, the social movement is very strong, right? So of all these communities that you have been working is fascinating, and I'm sure that there's a lot of ways that we can understand to the knowledge, the local knowledge that is available there in the Amazon, to do the right interventions. And the bee and the honey idea is great, because then we can really find a way to ensure food security for the farmers and the communities, and also generate income. And using the agroforestry systems, as you said, also to become more self-sufficient in terms of external inputs. So it's really great to hear that this social component is so strong within your work. And of course, we see the challenges of now the politics in Brazil in regards to the Amazon. But I'm sure that the work that is being done, it's a result of a positive way of changing things. And so I'm really positive about what comes next. And thank you so much for the explanation, Anna. So I'll get now to Matteo. Matteo, if you could please explain the approach you have in regards to regenerative agriculture, working with the focus that you have on soil, would be great. If we can try to be a little bit shorter in the answers, that would be great. Just a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. No, thanks. No, I'll start just by saying that I mean, one of the big things one of the roles that Greenpeace has as a global organization with regenerative agriculture is very much in our advocacy work. We really have a role to play in amplifying the know-how and the knowledge and the voices that Anna was just talking about. I think that's one of the most important things that we do as an organization, because we're global. So we work a lot, Greenpeace Belgium, obviously, with Greenpeace Brazil. And it's all about amplifying the rights and plights of indigenous communities when it comes to not just regenerative agriculture, but also in fighting these industrial forms that very much abuse the rights, the human rights of these different communities locally. Also in our solutions work, I think it's very important to highlight the fact that when it comes to regenerative agriculture, we need to see innovation. We need to understand innovation in the broad sense of the term. So when we talk about innovation in agriculture, we often talk about technology, and I really hope we do talk about technology today too, because I think it's a misconception that agroecology is without tech or is backward. I think it's something we should definitely talk about. But what I wanted to say is that when I think of agroecology and when we promote agroecology, it's really about promoting systems innovation and know-how innovation and organizational innovation, right? So looking at different ways of distributing goods, looking at different ways of, obviously, of different agroecological practices. So there you have the kind of indigenous often know-how that has often been ignored. And then also looking at kind of systemic, wider innovation. On the other hand, with Greenpeace, we focus a lot on policy. So I think when you talk about regenerative agriculture, one of the biggest barriers is the fact that worldwide, and this is especially the case in the EU, we have a subsidies scheme, so the Common Agricultural Policy, which makes up about a third of the EU budget, right? So we're talking about 360 billion euros every 7 to 10 years, which often gets pushed towards a certain model of agriculture, cash commodity crops, industrial animal agriculture, and so forth. And if we're serious about this transition, we need to really look at legislation and at shifting this money towards a different model. At least in the short term, before some of these models might not be completely, the business approach might not be completely operational yet, you really do need that transition money. So you need a funnel that encourages farmers and that actually rewards farmers for the ecosystem services that they provide, right? So because the whole point about regenerative agriculture, and here I come to the role of soil, is they're very much at its very foundation, they're building soil, right? They're building resilience, they're building agriculture for the future, right? When you look at conventional, in the broad sense, agriculture, it's very much in the past been an industry that sees agriculture as an extractive model, right? We mine our soils, we plow our soils, we take away from the soils, we take the nutrients out, we emit carbon when we overplow the soils. And one of the beauties with regenerative agriculture, which is a very broad term, is you have practices that encourage us to keep that soil structure, to keep the mycorrhizal fungi, to keep all these, the richness, the kind of, the rich black gold of soil, as I like to call it. It's about stocking, it's about sequestering carbon, it's about building up resilience. And on a last point, maybe to make it very context specific and very relevant at the moment for Belgium, we're currently experiencing an unprecedented drought across Europe, but especially in Belgium. Actually, the last 2 months, so in April and May, we had the driest April and May since 1833. So I mean, it's been 4 years in a row now that we've had drought problems. And I think from an agriculture perspective, if we can view agriculture as a solution, that's where regenerative agriculture comes in. Viewing the soil as a sponge that can soak up water, that can hold water, that can retain water, and that can keep it for periods where you have more droughts, and that can store it better when you have too much rain. So in Belgium, it's not that we have less rain than we did, let's say 20 years ago. It's just that it's falling at the wrong time. So because of climate change, we're having massive downpours. All that rain is getting washed away, and the soil is too, because of certain practices in agriculture. And if we switch to this more regenerative model, and if we support that through policy on the one hand, and on the other hand, advocacy work, that two-pronged approach that we take, then I think regenerative agriculture really has a future. So policy on the one hand, and advocacy work, convincing farmers and consumers that it's not only feasible but desirable and necessary.
Thank you so much, Matteo. It's really good that you mentioned this, because I mean, the resilience within the farms in regards to soil, it's so key, and also biodiversity, of course, because it's, in the end, it's all about risk mitigation, right? So if farmers, they don't have this resilient environment to work on a landscape level, then how can we actually feed him, everyone in the future? So this is a very strong statement. And then that's always when I receive this question, what's the risk of investment in regenerative agriculture? And I ask again, what is the risk of not investing in regenerative agriculture? So I mean, that's pretty strong what you were saying, and I really feel much in line with it. And I will get a hook of what you were also already mentioning, that we want to talk about tech, because I do believe that the Thought for Food, the whole community, is so strong in that component. I mean, I know Mariana from AgriSmart that also won the prize in the Thought for Food once, and she's developing amazing technologies to support farmers with data in regards of how much water to use, how much inputs. So this technology and the digital has a really important role to play in regenerative farming. And I want to hear from you guys in an open discussion, what you guys think about tech, and how we can actually incorporate that into the work we're now doing in this approach.
I love what Matteo was saying about sort of the soil part of it too, and this conversation about soil, because I think a lot of people who aren't involved in this type of work, they call soil dirt. They don't understand that soil is alive and it's living and it's an organism that contributes to every part of the ecosystem. So I love that we've kind of touched on that. But in terms of the tech part of it, I think it's huge. I mean, technology is what's going to allow us to really accelerate the spread of information when it comes to regenerative agriculture, but it's also what's going to allow us to ensure that, we're operating sort of at peak efficiency when it comes to regenerative agriculture. It's going to give us the information and the data that we need to make the right predictions, to build the right sort of systems. And you know, even if, you know, it's incorporating indigenous or traditional knowledge, when you put that into, you know, tech systems and systems that can analyze that data really effectively, we're going to be able to create systems that, you know, have more output. So it's going to play a huge role. And I think tech is also a big way for me. I like to look at how can I use tech to create social enterprises to sort of generate revenues and generate, you know, funding that can then support people who are doing the work hands-on, right, who are at the ground sort of level. And, you know, if tech really embraces the idea of sort of social entrepreneurship and how they can give back beyond the technology they're creating, but actually in sort of a monetary way as well, to help support, you know, the farmers on the ground and the people developing new sort of methods and sort of conservation techniques. I think that will be big too. It's a way to sort of elevate the impact and really magnify it and spread it across different levels. So.
Yeah, you guys can continue. Like I would like to make it open for you guys to discuss as well on this.
In the UK context, I think there's government organisations that are actually quite proactive in getting information about how to improve some aspect of farming, but we have a bit of a problem with the average age of the farmer in the UK city, and they don't want to reinvent their business, and they've been reliant on EU subsidies for their entire working careers. So the knowledge is there, but the opportunities for people to do it isn't. It's as much informing consumers about the impact of their food and being able to connect them with farmers. So for us, we can be successful because through Instagram and through Facebook, we have a market of people who are interested, who can pick up on that. The problem is big food companies and supermarkets who sometimes promote things which might not be the best option from an environmental point of view, societal point of view. They are better at using that tech to influence consumers than me as an individual farmer can.
Okay, I'll jump already. So, I mean, from the bees perspective, we work with many different bee species. So there are many different bee species there, native from the area. And there's a lot of data to know which bee likes which flowers more. So we are working with this data. That's like a key, and we intend, one of Melly's member also work with the impact of climate change in one specific species of bees. So all of that, we are developing a database to work with that better. So it was not our first plan, let's say, but like there's just a lot of data. So we need to work with that. And I think that's definitely a key also because, so mainly in the first moment, we want to focus in Jewish species to produce, because we need to focus at some points, but we intend also to work in a broader spectrum with all this data that we are analyzing. And I find it also very important to point out that first, that in each place, because like we talk a lot about technology and so on, and I mean, even some rural communities we work with, we spread news via radio. So they don't have internet access there. So we are right now developing some video classes, and so to advertise in this rural community, we because actually this community even hears my podcast because it's they also pass there. So in this radio, the community radio. So we already have a kind of relationship since a while. But yeah, I mean, so we need to go, but in the same time, that we need to work with the technology that are available there. We also know that like indigenous people, like Bepunu Kayapod, the drawer of this bee, he is a filmmaker, and there are a lot of indigenous filmmakers. And I mean, it would be great to develop also more, as Chris mentioned, to share this knowledge, and we intend to develop like documentaries made by them and so on. So it's kind of a lot of possibilities. We are still in the start of the road, so there's a lot to do, but we see a great potential, and technology, of course, helps a lot.
Yeah, I love that, and I want to jump in here a little bit as well, because I know from a lot of our startups globally who are working a lot on tech, who are really doing that to connect the farmers a lot. And so this can be for regenerative agriculture, but also other practices. And there are really so many benefits that they're like after as well. So one is, obviously, we mentioned this before, so that we don't lose that knowledge that's been in communities for years and years and years. But even just between one farmer and the next, it doesn't mean that they're necessarily communicating with each other, and to just have that knowledge and share that knowledge. As well as empowering farmers. We see that over and over again. You know, this like knowledge is key, communication is key. And so any scheme that will support that can really raise them up. And then kind of, yeah, all that data comes into spots, trends. And then as well, you can reward schemes that work. And we've seen this has been a really big focus this year, especially in the challenge, from what we saw in various different areas of the globe, to then have that access to funding coming with it as well. Because there's this issue of a lot of smallholder farmers or smaller farmers who don't get necessarily the funding and can't show what they've been doing. And so the tech helps them to support them in that, and to have this track record. And I think that can be really powerful as well. So there are so many ways that the tech can be used. And it's brilliant to see what you guys are doing, and also part of the Thoughtful Food community in just many different countries, kind of, yeah, applying these technologies for good.
Matteo, would you like to add something to what everyone said?
Yeah, I think I just add that, I mean, what's clear for me is that it has to be, I mean, it's self-explanatory and it seems quite obvious, but I think it's important to state it, that the tech really has to address real needs on the ground, right? To promote, you know, food sovereignty for these farmers, and promote food justice and food security. And so the question I always usually ask with technology is, well, first of all, I mean, there's no need to romanticize agroecology as something that's from the past. So tech clearly has its role to play. But at the same time, I pose myself the question, okay, tech for whom, right? So putting my Greenpeace critical thinking hat on, I think it's very important that we don't forget that tech can be used for good, as we've clearly stated here, and especially, I agree, especially with the fact that it can be used to share indigenous knowledge, and between farmers, I think it can be very useful. But if it's tech that's being imported with a specific mission, with a specific business model, with foreign direct investment, that's then again taken out of the country or taken out of the local context, which I think still happens far too much in the name of tech, in the name of development, in the name of food security, then I think we have a real problem. So I think tech in that sense can be a double-edged sword. So if it's decentralized, if it's applied on the ground, then I'm all for it. But I think every time when we talk about tech in the broader sense, we need to talk about who's bringing it, for who is it, and who's really benefiting from the business model that's coming there. But I think here it's been very clear that what we're focusing on is tech on the ground for those communities and for those farmers, for the Regen Ag community. But it is something that, it does sometimes for me get alarm bells going off, to just be careful with what we mean by tech and for whom.
I think, though, it's important to say, like, even though it's tech on the ground, the overarching part of it too, and making that sort of information available on supply chains and to consumers and things like that is going to play a huge role in it too. I mean, at Bumblechain, one of the things we're doing is we're going to make information available to consumers so they can see what types of plants were pollinated by the bees, by those bees that made their honey. What were the climatic conditions? What environment was it growing in? And those are things that empower consumers to make better choices about the food that they want to consume, and sort of the sustainability aspects of it, and who they want to support with their dollars. So I think, you know, it does need to be on the farmer side, but we also need to think about the consumers too. And then even, you know, obviously the trade and the supply chain part of it, you know, a lot of it is quite negative. If you look at, you know, the honey industry now, all of the adulteration and fraud and that's happening, and sort of the undercutting of the farmers. But by introducing technology into that supply chain, you can help alleviate some of those issues. You can help, you know, make the supply chain more sustainable and generate data about sustainability so that we can fix some of those problems. So I do see, you know, where you're coming from, that, you know, who's the tech for and those types of things. But I think that although when we talk about regenerative agriculture, we're probably thinking about sort of more on the ground, there's other people that are part of that, and empowering the consumers to understand regenerative agriculture and where their food's coming from, and giving them technology to clearly see that picture and have it sort of at their fingertips, I think is going to play a big role as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I really like what Matteo, Kelcie were discussing now. I think it's an important topic in the sense that, you know, just like tech, capital plays the same role. They are both tools to achieve either degeneration or regeneration. So I think if it's in good use, then we can make we can create an abundant future for the coming generations. So it's really powerful what you said. And also, Kelcie, what you said with the consumer, and also relates to what Matteo was saying before, with the advocating for consumers and companies and policymakers, which is very much important. And I truly agree, like there is some tax already being used for regenerative agriculture purpose, which is very, very important. Like NORI, for example, in US, this is like a tool to connect carbon traders with farmers that are sequestering carbon. So they have these measurements on soil carbon that it gets to a final number, and then this is translated into the capital injection from, you know, offsetting companies, which is basically a platform to link them to, which is very powerful. You know, if you think about all the carbon credits today is going 85 to 95 to 80 to 90% into reforestation, which is still using monoculture, you know, trees to do that. It's pretty damaging in a sense in terms of ecosystem services. So using regenerative agriculture purpose to bring this capital and put back to farmers and soil, this is really powerful, and tech it's helping on that sense. And then within reNature, just to quickly mention, like our goal is to actually create this regenerative marketplace where we say, okay, how many production you have in your farm? Because if it's a regenerative farm, it's for sure diversified. It's not only one single species. So we show how many kilograms or tons of each crop is giving, and then we connect to regenerative brands that are willing to, you know, source from regenerative farms. So we want to kind of make this connection between, you know, brands that wants to source regeneratively and farms that are producing regeneratively. So this is something, I mean, we can definitely talk more about how tech can play a role in this, but I do have another question to you guys. And this is about how can regenerative agriculture be more cost and labor efficient compared to conventional practice? Because we know there is some cost involved in the transition phase in the beginning, which some farms already sees as a challenge to actually do the transition. And it's also a little bit more cost in terms of knowledge, because it is knowledge intensive, and that it can become more costly in the labor. And I want to hear you guys' opinion about how to make more efficient in terms of cost and labor in regenerative ag space. So yeah, the floor it's up to you guys who would like to start.
Have you guys heard about true cost accounting? Something that Sustainable Food Trust put out, and it's about the food at the moment. It's got all these hidden costs that aren't there in the actual cost of the food. So that's the environmental downsides, the health downsides. So cheap food as it is, that's false, and that can't go on. So it's going to be more expensive in the future. So having it more expensive now is relatively a good decision. It's saving money in the long term. In terms of, for me on the farm here, the way I've designed our business is we're using the events to fund the transition from the old model to the new model. This wouldn't work for everyone, because it's like a farmer that's out somewhere that's really hard to get to isn't going to be able to bring in that model. For me, I reckon this is where subsidies need to step in and allow those people that can't transition, because existing farmers as they are, once you have to feed their family, if they've got a model that supports their family, they can't take that massive decision to completely rip up their business plan, take on all that cost, and then have something new. So events is how we've designed it. We've then designed it also around people, so we can get people to volunteer or come as learning experiences to do some of that labor. But then it's also been working out how the balance of, if a more complex system is more environmentally beneficial, that's good, but how can we simplify it to allow for a degree of mechanization so that it's more commercially viable? And that's currently what we're trying to balance up. But thinking creatively about how we get labor, that's going to be ongoing throughout my career, I think. Having the educational side of it, having the social care side of it, social, like nature prescription, that kind of thing, giving people jobs which are meaningful. If we're moving towards, say, like self-service checkouts and all of that, and a lot of these menial tasks that people are being lost, there's going to be a whole group of people ready to go out and do something. They could be working in farmland doing something positive. For me, it's subsidy systems need to change to support that.
I think an important thing to probably note is that with regenerative agriculture, I don't think it needs to be all or nothing. I think regenerative agriculture is going to be an amazing tool, especially in smaller rural communities, in places where the land has been degraded. It's going to sort of enable them to sort of create their own food systems, create food security, and that's going to be, really sustainable. However, is regenerative agriculture going to be able to feed a city of millions of people? We don't need it to be all or nothing. We can, still incorporate ideas of regenerative agriculture and those technologies and some of those systems into, a new agricultural system. Obviously, we need to shift, but it doesn't need to be all or nothing, because it's not going to fit all sorts of scenarios. I mean, we have to look at any ecosystem has a set carrying capacity. With proper management, perhaps we can increase that carrying capacity and the production a little bit. But simply put, Earth has clearly sort of surpassed its carrying capacity, and we're going to need to have some sort of other food production as well, whether it's sort of vertical farming or some of those new methods. But I think it's important to note that, you know, it's not going to be the solution for everywhere, but a good first step is starting to incorporate some of these regenerative agricultural practices, and, you know, applying as much learning of it to traditional systems as we can and sort of grow from there. But again, like the tradition or the transition isn't going to be a quick one. A good documentary to watch that's on Netflix is called The Biggest Little Farm. I don't know if anyone's seen that, but it's kind of, you know, eye-opening in that it's such a complex system, and ecosystem isn't just its individual parts. It's so interconnected that it takes a lot of time and a lot of sort of tinkering to get it right. And if you watch that, I mean, it takes them years and to even start, you know, producing food to sort of sell at farmers markets and things like that. So I think, you know, it's going to be a learning process. And I love how you were talking about sort of your farm, how you're kind of like learning, but it's not going to be the right fit for like all locales. Like they can't all take the same approach you're going to take. So I think it will be really good if we can like share and communicate and like help each other do the best we can, I suppose, knowing that, you know, it's going to look a little bit different for each farm even.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Anna,
I mean,
Matteo, if you guys would like to add something.
yeah, I find very valid the what who I hope I said it right wrote that's about the learning experience part, because with Melly we are closely working with universities, and that's definitely allowing us to do much more. Also because they go, it's definitely a process, and also like there are different situations, and like there are communities, rural communities that are like 20 small areas that they always work together, and they already have a practice of doing that, like in the regenerative overview, and they just lack on technical support because like there was short-term projects going there, but now they lack on assistance. And we kind of, the fact that we are there all the time, that helps a lot to actually have a long-term perspective working all the time with them. So there's that, but there's also the people like, oh no, regenerative agriculture takes so much more time, and they're like, and then we can say, oh, like, hey, they're like, the students are here also to help, and like we kind of try to bring a community to support that. But of course it's a process, and we are just starting, so there's a lot to do, there's a lot to go. And I do think if we do take care of our soil, and if we do have I mean, we are working with bees now, right? So we know like how much more productivity we reach with that. So I do think regenerative agriculture is actually about reaching higher levels of production. So for me, that's one of the keys. Like if you have, I mean, I just started this beautiful book about the sacred life of trees, and like and and how they, when it's all working together, like so much more productive. And I mean, and we are seeing there are a lot of examples. So yeah.
I think Anna makes a really valid point there about makes me think of the study that the Rodale Institute did, right? The 30-year side-by-side study between conventional and organic agriculture, and how it does show, you know, I think it's between 8 and that organic agriculture has a lower yield. I think in the best case scenario, it's 8%. So it's getting close, but it doesn't quite have the yields of conventional agriculture. But what I think is much more important there is the fact that it's much more resilient in periods of fluctuation, right? So when it comes to drought, the studies show that organic yields are more stable. They have less fluctuations than the conventional systems. And I think it's also important to point out when we talk about food security and the food security debates and about feeding, 9.7 billion people by 2050, is that when you look at the calories produced a day of an industrial system, or just the calories produced a day, are already sufficient for 9.7 billion people. I mean, hunger is has never been a question of scarcity of food. It's been a scarcity of access, scarcity of distribution, scarcity of democracy. I mean, that's, I think, one of the founding myths that I think we need to challenge about industrial agriculture. Now, having said that, I realize and I agree with Kelcie, it's not as simple as from today to tomorrow stepping over every single farm to regenerative agriculture. I think that's one of the great things about the term regenerative agriculture, is that it's quite inclusive. And so you have practices that can be incorporated tomorrow and that can start helping with that transition. But at the same time, I agree with Anna that we shouldn't underestimate the power of these and the potential of these different systems to produce and to deliver. They might not today, but I'd also, put in the caveat that, we invest in industrial agriculture, when it comes to both public and private investments, it's 100 to 1. It's not a fair comparison when you have organic agriculture here specifically just is massively underfunded. Just yesterday, or even today, I think this morning, there was a report for Belgium now showing that our foreign investments over the last 4 years, from 2003 to 2013 to 2017, only 17% went to agroecological practices. So I think it was the 1.2 billion euros that Belgium invested abroad in agriculture is predominantly still going to a system that's outdated. And out of that, there was actually only 7% that was purely public. The rest was still NGOs investing. So it just goes to show, I think, that when we're talking about the potential of regenerative agriculture, we have to keep in mind that we're still massively subsidizing another system. We're not investing nowhere near as much as we should, so we don't really know the true potential. And then when it comes to climate volatility, which is what I like to call it, not climate change, because it's all about the fact that we don't know, there's a volatility in weather rather than just a change. It's not a change that it's not a gradual process, right? So you might have 4 years of droughts in a row in Belgium, and next year we might have floods. And so with that volatility, I think regenerative agriculture systems are more resilient. And I think we can't underestimate that. And the last point I'd mention, which is what Hugh mentioned, and I completely agree, and what Felipe mentioned too, is, what's the cost of not doing it? So if we're talking about the cost of regenerative agriculture, the cost of not doing it is clear, and true cost accounting is the perfect way of looking at that. If we were to make a fair comparison today, I think the picture would be a lot different.
I think I would just
you go first.
I will just point out just that that's this transition, exactly what Kelcie and Matteo point out. It's a key as well, because even the big landowners that work with cattle in the Amazon area, they are right now, many of them are working with this, they need to, there's a technique Embrapa developed with them to exactly kind of getting close to succession agriculture in a sense. So there's a path for us to go, and it's not going to be from today to tomorrow, but there's simply, when I think about the cattle in the Amazon, I think how they see themselves, there's no way to go further than here because I cannot produce in this way. It's not, that's exactly the cost of not working with regenerative agriculture. So it's not that they have an option to go further, because even the Amazon is not infinite. You cannot, right now, if you look at, when I moved to Marab, when I used the Google Maps for the first time, and I saw our view. It was like just in my city, just Marabá region was kind of a gray, like not that green. That showed me, I was very sad because I was like, okay, we are clearly in the middle of the arc of deforestation. I could see that. Nowadays, the only green areas are the reserves and the indigenous, like the traditional people areas. So there's not much to go, much further to go. So we reach a point that they really need to work that. We really need to go in a more regenerative way. There's simply not another option.
I think one area of sort of tech that we haven't added that I think will play a big role, and if we incorporate it into sort of regenerative agriculture practices, is also the importance that GMO crops will play, right? And introducing them into regenerative agricultural systems, right? Because they're going to have more sort of calorie output. They're a lot more resilient to sort of climate volatility and those types of things. And that's sort of an area of technology is, as we get further with it, I think is something that will really complement regenerative agriculture in a positive way too. So that's, we're talking about tech before, sort of from a technology app, that sort of perspective, but a lot of, up and coming biotechnologies, I think are going to have huge roles too in this transition.
Perfect. No, thank you guys. Like, this is really like a lot of good information we all have now based on what tech and how can we actually make more cost effective in a sense, and the perspective of the macro view on how to adopt regenerative agriculture at scale. I mean, there's so many interesting questions also in the Q&A that we have under there, but we'll have to come back to that at another moment. We have 8 minutes to go, and it was fantastic to have all of you guys here. And as a final question to all of you, I would like to see what are your learnings working in regenerative agriculture space that you would like to pass to another entrepreneurs, innovators, change makers, and whoever is here watching us today, as a kind of a call to action or as a inspiration that you got from the learnings to everyone. So yeah, I will start with I will leave the floor open because there's no pressure in that. Otherwise, I'll pick up.
I can go first. So one thing I would say is you can start small as long as you start somewhere.
I forgot to mention 2 minutes. If you can be like 1 minute and 2 minutes short, it would be great. Perfect. Okay,
so yeah, I would say just start small, start somewhere. You don't need to have all the solutions. You don't have to do it perfectly to start. But regardless of what sort of area of agriculture you're working in, there's definitely ways that you can contribute to and incorporate regenerative agriculture into your work. So just start somewhere, even if it's small.
Thank you, Kelcie.
Great. I would ask you first to take a look on your area. What grows there? So what's native from there, which kind of bees you have there. And I mean, I'm sure you can do something in a very small scale and try to embrace the nature around you. That's very
Thank you, Anna.
So for me, I learned about permaculture as a design system, and that's fundamentally been the basis of how I've designed my business. And kind of from that, the importance of observation, so learning what's going on around and building from there. And then in practice, some things are going to go wrong and some of it's going to be graphic, but that's all right.
Nice. Thank you so much.
I would just add, first of all, well, just like Anna mentioned, look what's around you. I mean, start with your local community and get in touch with. I mean, if you're getting into the regen ag space from the practical side, then get in touch with people like you and get in touch with farmers, you know, who have the practical experience. I don't think there's any substitute for that. And then one more last piece of advice, I mean, would be to always take nature as your benchmark, right? I mean, if you can mimic nature, you can mimic the complexity of nature. I think that's what regen ag is all about. It's that's the way you regenerate. That's the way you build healthy soils.
Perfect. Thank you so much, guys, for your contribution, your knowledge exchange today. It was great. And to everyone as participants to be here. It was a really beautiful discussion with a lot of to sleep on today. So that's great. And also I'm really, really glad that Fought for Food organized this for everyone so that we can definitely have more sessions like this to discuss this topic, which is so crucial in these times. And I will leave to Mahi to, you know, just kind of close this session. And I really appreciate here Christine, who is also watching us today, the founder of Fought for Food. She's the one that connected us all in this, and especially the beginning of reNature started everything in the Fought for Food. And then yeah, I really appreciated this. It really impacted everyone's around us. So thank you so much. So Mahi, I will leave the floor to you to finish this. I really appreciate everyone's presence. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Felipe. I'd like to add to that this is, obviously it's been a great discussion, but also it's really nice to see Felipe, who met his co-founder at TFF and is now many years down the line running a beautiful organization. And we've got Kelcie and Anna here who came from this year's challenge. And we love kind of connecting those dots and bringing everybody together to discuss what they're doing. Because again, today we've had a very international panel, and it's really great to hear that wherever they are, they're seeing similar trends, similar issues, and can also really energize each other and have different inputs, which has been really nice. I like where the conversation has taken us. There's been plenty of great ideas, inputs and views, and especially to hear from your experiences directly as well. It's been really, really good. So of course, as usual, the session is going to be on the Digital Labs, our free collaborative platform. And I'm sure that you can get in touch with any of our panelists here as well if you want to hear more about what they're doing. But it's been an absolute pleasure. So thank you very much, all 5 of you. And we hope to have you back soon. To all the attendees, also thanks for joining. And we do have these live sessions fairly regularly on great topics. Also, if you want to suggest a topic, I feel like tonight we touched very, very briefly and then time ran out on whether GM or genetic engineering could be a solution and how that fits in with regenerative agriculture. But so there are going to be lots of more interesting conversations to come. So again, thank you everybody, and enjoy the rest of your evening or day or nights, depending on where in the world you are. It's been an absolute pleasure having you all.
Bye everyone.
Good night.
Take care.
Thanks everybody. Bye.